A very good morning to you. It's 2025. My name is still David Batsoffen, and this is still Off the Shelf. And my first guest of 2025 is a woman that I first worked with back in the early 1970s when the two of us did a production together here in Johannesburg called A Little Night Music. And that is Andre Hattingh, who has just brought out this wonderful little book called, well, it's not so little, it's a coffee table book. It comes with legs. If you don't have a table, you can use the book as a table. It's called My Leaves Stay Green, a book of poetry. Note the clever use of the word because this is a feature throughout the book. Andre, good morning. Welcome to you.
Good morning, darling. It's delightful to be climbing this tree with you.
I love I love the way you've integrated the word tree into the book. And it took me a while to figure it out and to find out how you'd done it. And every chapter, I have the book here with me. Every chapter has that, it's like deep roots, tree secrets, and then you have, and it's my best, you have auditories because you seem, like me, seem to like trivia. But before we get to that, because that's right at the back of the book, tell me
Yes.
about the book and how it came about and why you just happen to be wearing the same outfit today as you are wearing on the cover
No,
of the
not
book.
exactly
Not
the same.
exactly the
This
same.
one's it's just because I go for 40 shades of purple, darling. So anything purple is my color.
Because you can. You're at that
Because
stage.
I, and
You're
it
at
also
that
goes
stage.
with the hydrangeas in the wall. I mean, I
I
didn't want to go
noticed,
red or something like that because
yeah,
then it doesn't,
then
it's
you'll
got to be,
clash.
yes, you've got to have the right color, Miss
Yeah.
Scott.
So tell us about the book and tell us about how it came about.
Yes. Well, I think many people think, well, what is an actress and a singer and a songwriter and a dress designer? What are they doing now writing a book? And then
Mhm.
about trees, nogal.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually because because I have always written poems and I've
Mhm.
always written songs since I was tiny. In fact, my first published poem was when I was 7 years old, and
Right.
it was quite incredible poem when I look back on it in time. I was lying underneath a trampoline and looking at the stars, and this little girl wrote this poem. How small are we that the stars we see are just stepping stones to eternity.
At
So, quite
seven.
at 7 years old, and I can prove it to you because it's in a book.
But why under a trampoline? If you write words like that, Andre, you should have been lying on your back in the middle of a large garden or a farmyard somewhere in the Midlands,
It was
looking
under
up
the
at.
trampoline because I was running away from the noise of all the other kids leaping around and talking, and
Okay.
nobody was sleeping on the trampoline at the time. But I can remember it very clearly, and there the stars were shining through the
Mm.
springs. And that was the very first poem that I wrote was printed. But otherwise, I've always been singing songs and writing songs. And so it's actually an extension of me. And of
Mm.
course, trees, growing up on a farm,
Yeah.
trees and nature were very close to me. So the book is all about trees and all about the world around us and the world inside us. And I suppose your question wasn't that. It was about how did the book come around. But how the book
We'll
actually
get there
started.
eventually. This is the beauty about off the shelf, Andre. There are no right or wrong answers, and it doesn't matter how long you take to get to the destination or to the actual answer of the question. It's the story of getting there, which is what you're telling me, which is exactly what I want to know anyway.
Where I'm very glad to hear that. But actually, this particular book or a collection of my poems, which I've never ever had before, started because do you remember? I think nobody will ever forget the greatest landmark in our lives in recent times has been the COVID pandemic.
Mm.
And when that hit us, and I, I was amazed that I was sitting isolated. I couldn't see my friends. I couldn't visit them. We couldn't communicate excepting through Facebook. We were locked up behind gates. I mean, it's amazing to believe that we actually lived through all of this.
Mm.
Believed what people are telling us. Well, I certainly didn't believe what the ministers were telling us. Don't do this, don't do this. And when you don't wear sandals and T-shirts unless they this and this and this. So anyways, during this particular time that I wrote a poem. I'll read you that little poem now, because
Thank
that
you.
started the whole bloody thing off. If I can find it. Here it is. Does anyone feel a lethargy, a depressing sort of malaise, a kind of desperate doom and gloom that lasts for days and days? I wonder where there's a booster shot to prevent this awful phase. Perhaps we should ask old Elon Musk or fly off to space. So, you see, that's how it all started, was being full of nonsense and deciding to communicate about COVID on Facebook.
Right.
And I started thinking, gosh, no, I can't always just be writing funny things. What about bringing nature into our home? Because after all, that's the thing, that many people were locked up and weren't able to go and see trees and weren't able to go and do all these wonderful things, like look at, have space to see the sky and the clouds and all that sort of stuff. So that's how the book started, was I was writing a little poem every day to cheer up my friends. And then after the years of COVID went by, many people started saying, well, where are your poems? Carry on writing your poems. And then many people, as you saw in the book, I've quoted some of them, to say, it's about time you put them all together in a book. So that's how My Leaves Stay Green came into a book.
And the book is available in its current form, and we'll get to that in just a moment. And you quote lots of people. I read through most of them to see if I recognized any names. And of course, the first one that jumped out at me was Judy Page, who said, darling Andre, your poetry flows from you so naturally. You paint pictures with words. What a great talent to add to all the other talents you've been blessed with. Keep flowing. Lynette Heron, I know you've just been down to Spionkop. You are amazing, says Lynette. And there's all this sort of wonderful stuff. It's not necessarily only a poetry book, though, Andre. It's a history of your life, and from where you found yourself to where you are today. And that's what makes it not necessarily for poetry people only. Because when I got your book, I thought, I'm not a great poetry person, I'm the sort of Spike Milligan type poetry person,
Yeah. Well, there's a section in there for you, as you saw.
Yeah, but he does that. Not quite the boy stood on the burning deck. I left my shoes and socks there. I wonder if I must go down to the sea again, to the lonely sea and sky. I left my shoes and socks there. I wonder if they're dry. It's that type of, that's about my level of poetry. I've never understood it. I've never sort of gone in depth. But then your book came along and it's just so magical. It really and truly is, because it offers the reader a variety of things. Yes, there's poetry. There are beautiful, beautiful artworks by Bronwen Findlay, and we'll get to her in just a moment. And then there's the trivia, which hupsed me in a moment. Those odditries, I love that sort of thing. The world's oldest tree, the world's fastest growing tree. Did you pick all of them, or did you just Chappie's bubblegum paper and go, let's do these?
No, well, it's I started thinking about informing people about trees.
You're right.
Because people don't appreciate the tree. The trees are the most spectacular things in the world, and that they're so important to the world, and that they've been watching us for centuries, that they know everything. They've got all these wonderful talents, and they communicate with one another, and all these magical things like myth trees, because the ancient times trees represented myths and curiosities and all these things. But there's a few little bits thrown in to make people curious and make people look at trees in a different way.
Well, you see, that's the thing. Trees are everywhere. Trees are like impalas in a game reserve. They're all over the place, and you stop seeing them. You literally don't see the wood for the
Yes,
trees. And then
yes.
when a tree does stand out for whatever reason, you go, "Oh my goodness, it's a tree." Now, when
Yeah.
we bought our house, we have a common ash in our garden, a common ash tree. And
Yes.
it looked dead when we came to look at the house. So we wrote, and the estate agent said, "No, this tree is definitely alive." So we wrote a clause into our contract saying we would not sign papers until we saw the first green leaf.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. And when the first green leaf appeared, we phoned the estate agent and we said, "We're ready to sign." And it happens every year. This tree dies off during winter, reappears during spring, and it
Yes.
goes from brown, from absolutely dead to
Yes.
green in literally 2 days. It's the weirdest thing. And we watch,
It's
my wife and I look out the windows every year and we marvel at the tree. We really do.
amazing. It
So
does. We talk about time passing, and
it
it's like
is.
my friends are the trees in my garden because they're the
Yeah.
closest. I can check them out.
So tell us about Bronwen's artwork. How did you find her?
Oh, yes. Now that's an amazing story. So now I'm thinking to myself that I want to make this amazing coffee table book with my poems. But how can a coffee table book be there without the photographs that I was using to accompany them on my posts?
Yeah.
And um, I thought, well, I'm not allowed to use those photographs because they don't belong to me, but I could use them on Facebook. You can rip them off from various places, as we all
Yeah.
know. And then I thought, well, I'll have to ask. Maybe an artist can do a few paintings of trees, and then I can tuck all the poems in different categories, and maybe do 4 or 5 paintings. Then I thought, but then how am I going to pay for them? Because I'm self-publishing a book anyway. So how am I going to pay somebody to do all that?
Mhm.
So it was just amazing that as the universe loves me so much, I banged into my old friend who is a famous and wonderfully esteemed artist here in Johannesburg. And her name is Bronwen Findlay. And she was at school with me. She sat in
Okay.
the class next to me. And in fact, she'd be sitting drawing the most wonderful drawings, and I'd be waiting to start to do an impersonation of Barbara Streisand. She was quiet, I was a noisy little number. And so that was where we became friends.
Mhm.
And all these years later, I've followed her wonderful career going all around all the fabulous galleries. And she has a permanent exhibition at the Everard Reed Gallery of
Mhm.
her most, a huge one. And Bronwen she's a tiny little thing. And she paints these enormous paintings that are like huge murals.
Mhm.
And she has to climb on ladders to paint them. And sometimes she paints the tiniest miniature. And so I thought I'm going to pluck up courage. I think she'll probably think I'm crazy, but I'm just going to say, hey, Bronwen, can't you paint me a couple of trees, please? And, I'll give you credit and everything. And she sat and we had some coffee on the veranda. And she said to me, oh, Andre, we're 70, we've got to use what we've got and our friendship and our painting and our works of art together. She said, you can use any one of my beautiful, well, she didn't say beautiful paintings, but I know beautiful paintings. You can use any one of my works of art and put them in the book.
Wow.
And then, wow, what an amazing gift for me. And it would be our book then, you
Mhm.
see. And I thought, that is just fantastic. And then I thought, well, the next trick is this book is really about a lot of trees. And she's not painted a lot of trees. So what are we going to do? So she
Rewrite
said,
all the
oh,
poems.
no, well, I'll paint you a couple of trees, 3 or 4 trees.
Mhm.
And she painted me a magnificent thorn tree because that's where I grew up. And I said, Bronwen, we both from Natal, paint me a thorn tree. So she's painted a thorn tree with a Drakensberg at the back, which is exactly where I grew up. And
Right.
so she did a few of those. And then I started looking at her poems and realizing they don't have to be about trees. I started looking at her paintings and they don't
Mhm.
have to be about trees because my poems I found inside some of her paintings.
Oh,
So when
wow.
you see the book, you will see that the paintings relate to what the poem is saying. So that's
And
how Brian I got together.
And that's a wonderful story, Andre, because you didn't have to rewrite anything. It just seamlessly blended together.
Absolutely. It was amazing. I mean, I think I gave her a couple of gray hairs in her beautiful red hair because I was phoning her and saying, do you have a high resolution of this one? And she said,
Yeah.
like 93 years ago, I don't know where it is. So I got running around trying to find the works of art that I had chosen to go with my poems.
Right.
So people who love painting will enjoy the book.
This is exactly, I mean, her work is stunning and beautiful. It really and truly is. And as you say, um, there's also branching out. That's you and your husband standing in the middle of what looks like the Drakensberg and sundry other places, including being photoshopped into a picture of the Taj Mahal. Just for people.
Well, we were actually that section, David, for the people who listening to this, is actually the section I have. The first section of the whole book is called Biography.
Yes.
It's all about my life. So it's the major section of the book. So you get a kind of potted biography that is colored with poems that relate to that period of time in my life.
Who came up with all the odditries in the book? Was it you by yourself, or you? Yeah, or not but the titles of the chapters, like oddity.
Yeah.
The inclusion of the word tree into almost every chapter.
Oh, that's new. I do this kind of stuff, and if you look at the poems, many of the poems are titled with a tree in the name of the poem. Yeah.
Do you have yeah? I was going to ask you if you have a favorite poem, if you'd share it with us.
Oh, I suppose the one called, let's see if I can remember it. It's called Winds of the Universe. The winds of the universe blew me through a door. I traveled to a place I'd never been before. Around me played an orchestra of stars, heavenly music from Jupiter to Mars. Each one played its very own tune, all to the rhythm of the double bass moon. And then I heard the voice of the earth. Deeply and softly I remembered her birth. When forests could breathe and rivers could flow, and man nurtured his garden, so all things could grow.
It's at that point that we should do.
Yeah, add on
unlike Oprah, I can't say to the audience, reach beneath your chairs and you'll each find that there's a copy. Everybody gets a copy of Andre's book.
Oh, I'd love them to, but then I would be even more broke than I am.
Was it a labor of love, or was it just a labor? And did you sort of say to friends afterwards, if only you hadn't said, where is the book? I wouldn't be broke and I wouldn't be worrying about doing book tours and book launches and publicity and all that sort of thing. And I could just go on writing my poems on a weekly or daily basis, sharing them on Facebook and getting on with my life.
Oh, no, it was an absolute labor of love from the moment that you must remember the poems kind of are inspired things. They rush into my mind. They rush in. And I don't really think the ones that I have to think about are not as good as the ones that just come.
Yeah.
And so they come to me just quickly. And so everything in this book has been an inspiration. Everything is painted with the love of Bronwen's paintbrushes and the love of my words. And the thing is that it's not deep poetry in the sense that it's 17 verses long and you have to try and find out what the poem means, like you have to do at school. And then I think the poet would be very astonished to find out all the things we thought it meant. But actually, they're short, concise poems that come to the point very easily. And there's all kinds of poems for all types of people. I mean, there's a section in the book that is exactly for you, and it's called Twiglets, funny twigs. And that's got all these 4-line poems about crazy animals and things, like once there was a hyena, no one could ever be meaner. He stole and he stank, was the lowest of rank, but he had a superior demeanor. So there are plenty of those kind of little things to amuse people.
When people pick on hyena, I always curse Disney because the Lion King gave them such a bad rep. Those crazy Eddie and the gang is not what
Yes,
hyenas are. They're great nurturers. They look after
yes,
their young and they clean up where other people mess. Because if it
yes.
wasn't for hyenas and vultures and jackals, our nature areas would be a stinking cesspit of carcasses and rotting flesh that nobody would go to the Kruger National Park to see.
Okay, I'll write you a poem on Hallelujah Hyena.
There you go. Thank you.
No, I agree. But I think it's just really a lot of nonsense that I've written about all these
But
crazy animals.
but now does this come to you sort of in the middle of the night? Do you go to sleep with a pen and paper or your
Yes,
a recorder next to you and then you wake up in the middle of the night and before Anthony can say, "What's the matter?" you go, "Wait, I have a poem that I need to write down."
yes, I do. In fact, I visit the loo often in the middle of the night and then they write it into my cell phone because then I don't have to switch on the light to worry. So that you write it in the cell phone, and then the next morning I doctor it up a bit if it needs doctoring up.
But now, with that in mind, my business mentor many years ago, bless him, he used to do that. He used to wake up in the middle of the night. He had a pad and a pen next to his bed, and he'd write stuff down that came to him in the night. And then in the morning, he'd
Yeah.
wake up and he told me he'd stare at this pad of paper with something written on it that he couldn't read
Yeah,
because he'd been half asleep when he wrote it.
wrote
And
it
it bore
down.
no resemblance to anything.
Yeah, you've got to be a bit, that's why I think the cell phone is probably better.
Yeah,
Um, if you can do it, have a shot in the dark and write a poem.
literally.
Yeah, in fact, I've written a lot of a book that I'm just busy writing, a children's book, and
Mhm.
that also happens in the middle of the night. I suddenly think, oh, what an amazing idea! I better go and write that down. Yeah, my inspirations come at the most peculiar times.
And that's when the best inspiration, I should imagine, comes. Now, you mentioned right in the beginning that you're a singer-songwriter. And
Yes,
when you and I first met, 1975, 76, with Little Night Music,
yes,
that's how I remember you. But now, are your poems available as music? Can
yes. In
people download them?
Yes, in fact, that's I'm glad you asked that because in the book I have many of my lyrics of my
Mhm.
songs in the book.
Right.
You can find those songs on iTunes or YouTube Music, and yeah, you can listen to them there or download them or whatever. And so most of them are there. And then one of the most recent sort of productions that I was involved in was during the famous COVID. I saw all these unbelievable number of my friends, and I'm sure yours too, because we have the same friends. Um, they just died of COVID, and none of us
Yeah.
could have a memorial for them. None of us could go and say goodbye, and it was the most tragic time because we couldn't say goodbye, and we couldn't go
Yeah.
and visit people when they were ill. And so I felt that it was just one list after the other. And I decided to research how many people had passed
I
away.
remember, now that you bring that up, I remember what you wrote and sang about. It was almost
Yes, yes.
like, did you
And
know
one,
that?
that we made a beautiful video of the song I
You did
wrote. It's
indeed.
called Gathering the Stars.
Yeah.
And a beautiful song, even if I say so for myself, it came to me in the kitchen when I was cooking. And I was crying because another friend of mine had passed away. And I came up with this lovely verse that we're gathering the stars, the show will still go on. After you've gone, you'll still linger on in the hearts that you've won. So I wrote that chorus, And then I wrote the life of what it is like to be an actor. And this video has been made, and it was a tribute to all these people. It's got all their names on it. And if anyone would like to watch it, it's on YouTube, called Gathering the Stars.
Yeah, and I suggest people that you do, because you forget who's left us. And
Yes,
I'll start with Dawn Lindbergh, and you just take
yes.
it from there. You know,
Yeah,
nobody, when we all heard the news, specifically of Dawn, I'm still
yes.
in shock. And it's what, 4 or 5 years later.
I know, I still
She
can't
was such
believe
a
it.
presence. She really
Yes.
was. For
And
everybody,
and
if you were in show business or not, you knew who Dawn Lindbergh was.
and the nice thing about the video is that we actually have it took us quite some time, because everyone was doing it for free,
Mm.
collecting the photographs of all these people.
Yeah.
So in the video, I actually pin the photographs one by one while I'm singing on the wall of the people who've passed away. So
Yeah.
if you don't remember their names, you remember
Remember
their
their
faces,
faces.
like
Yeah.
Haywood. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was unbelievable. Nearly 200 people.
I know.
And it just went on and on. So that was one of the songs too. So you can either go iTunes or and in fact one of the main tunes on my CD, called Change Your World, was a song that was written during my chemotherapy. I was diagnosed with cancer many years ago,
Mhm.
and during that period of time I was very creative, and I wrote lots and lots of music. And one of the songs was called My Leaves Stay Green. And that is
I
given
was
my book.
I was about to ask you where
Yes.
the title came from, and now you've answered that.
There
Andre,
you go.
you mentioned earlier that the book is self-published. And this
Yes.
seems to be the way that a lot of people are going nowadays, because publishers are not really that keen. It's difficult. People, I was actually saying to a publisher yesterday, it's easy. Everybody has a book in them. Getting it
Yes.
out is not too difficult. You can vomit onto a page, and it's either good, bad, or indifferent. And then you go to a publisher who goes, lovely work, nobody will read it. Thank you very much. And it's yet another rejection letter to add to the pile. And in fact, one author, just as an aside on that, and we'll come back to your book, wrote a book about a horse that had vanished. And then they found him 4 years later as the lead stallion in a herd of zebra. An
Oh,
amazing, and he was
incredible
recaptured.
story.
It was a wonderful story, and it eventually became a book. But he got 48 rejection letters before it was published. And one of the rejection letters said, if you could tell us where the horse was for those 4 years, we'll publish. And he goes,
No,
how?
I tell you, it's quite
How?
something.
Who comes up? Which ponytail, as John Robbie used to call them, which ponytail sitting in an office goes, there's the hook? Because then I would have invented 4 years of horse
Yes.
demeanor or horse
Yeah.
manure and sold it as the horse's backstory. Deal with
Yeah.
it.
No,
So,
no, absolutely.
so now self-published, are you publishing on demand then? Or is this
Yeah,
available in bookstores?
it's I do have it's available at book dealers
Hmm.
in Melville
Right.
and in the Bluebird Centre, and
Hmm.
also a lovely little bookshop called Love Books
Hmm.
here. It's also there. So I
Okay.
have got a couple of bookshops, and you can also order it directly from me, and I'll Aramex it to your door. And at the moment, next month, we are going to be going on a tour to launch my husband's wonderful book called Lucky Bastard, and we're traveling around doing that. And when I come back, I'm going to
You're going
be
to get stuck into this.
focused on my book, and I've written a little show that is around Baltimore.
Ah,
So I sing and I say poetry and I tell them a bit about my life. So it's like a 30, 40-minute entertainment that I'm happy to be booked for at anywhere, retirement villages, book launches, whatever.
bar mitzvahs, divorces. You have an
I'll
event
I'll be put in a nice kosher tree. We fix it.
When you mentioned Anthony's book, Lucky Bastard, it was on a shelf right next to me up until just a few days ago when I repacked my shelves. So I'd reached out. I was going to actually do this, but it's not there anymore.
Ah.
But it's put away properly. But we're not talking about Anthony's book. We're talking about My Leaves Stay Green. It's a book of poetry, TREE. And as I say, it's got all sorts of wonderful, wonderful bits and bobs. What I do like is your final bow, BOUGH. I bid you farewell for now. Promise me to go into the woods. And then there's a picture of you, not a painting, but a picture of you in the woods.
Yeah.
It's wonderful and it's heartwarming. And I think it's something that we need. You know, we get to the beginning of a new year and everybody goes, "Oh, I do hope this year is going to be better than last." And then you sort of go, it's only February and you're going, bloody hell. You know, we're already bogged down in the minutiae of a new year. And I think this will drag us, I don't want to say kicking and screaming because that's wrong, but it'll drag us into a headspace where we can all just take a moment and realize that what we have around us is so very special, Andre. And thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Oh, thank you, David. It's been a pleasure and wonderful. And please promise me to go into the trees and see them.
I shall do it. I shall go into my garden and hug my not so common ash.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, David. And thanks for having me as your guest. It's been delightful chatting.
It's only a pleasure. My guest today on Off the Shelf has been Andre Hattingh. This is her new book called My Leaves Stay Green. It is available, I was about to say at this very address, but I don't have that facility. But in the blurb that goes with this video, I will put her address so that you can order yourself a copy and maybe even a copy of the CD that accompanies with it. Andre Hattingh, thank you so much for joining me on Off the Shelf.
Tremendous.